1 year after the majorly successful Silent Hill 2 remake, Bloober Team has done it again, unveiling the fractured, horrifying world of New Dawn to the masses. As Traveler ND3576, you roam through time to uncover the mystery of humanity's demise at the hands of the Change, a sudden pandemic where humans morphed into orphans, hive-minded, man-eating zombies with an uncontrollable need to merge. Instagram Reels would have you believe that this is everyday Eastern Europe, but below the surface, Cronos the New Dawn highlights the intrinsic meaning of what it is to be human, and was a fascinating narrative exploration on that front. Though this isn't a think tank, I did love the more introspective side to this game, which felt like a beautifully polarizing switch off from the enveloping horror elements in its gameplay, of which includes its fair share of bosses. Unlike Dead Space 2 or Callisto Protocol, where I was honestly clutching at straws to make a ranking, Bloober Team continues to flex their remarkable capability to make survival horror fights. Cronos features a solid group of stringy, meaty alien freaks who collectively make for a very strong roster. Before we begin, I'd like to give a massive thank you to Bloober Team for providing us with early access. This game was a surreal experience, and I feel so lucky to have gotten my hands on it. As well, thank you as always to our patrons for their continued support, and with that said, let's get into the video. Number 5. Mother Eliza. I don't know what's up with fictional parasitic viruses obsessing over morphing things into giant amalgamations of slop, but so far it's not ever really worked out at all. As the Traveler makes her way through the church, hounded by an external voice threatening her as she edges closer to the Pathfinder's estimated sector, it becomes increasingly apparent that this banshee-like presence is none other than Eliza, Dr. David's daughter. Whether she's alive or dead is a mystery, up until you see a giant hunk of biomass with about 200 arms, 20 bright orange testicles, and a particularly nun-looking head with a veil. I actually love the design of this, and I feel this delivered in serving as a climactic pivot in the narrative. That said, as much as I believe this fight does its job, I'm just not a particularly big fan of set pieces, hence why it's at the bottom. Though I'm a known glazer of cinematic fights and survival horror games to consistent viewers of our channel, Mother Eliza exists as essentially a fiend-out blob nemesis also suffering from food poisoning. Her main gimmick is vomiting bile in the center column, which I embarrassingly got hit by quite a bit due to greed. I feel that honestly this could be the easiest enemy in the entire game to no damage if you have just a little bit of patience. Mother Eliza has 2 sets of polyps, one that sprouts while she's engaged in combat, and the other during the segments she spawns headless orphans. This is the best opportunity to get the Anvil of the Collective achievement, by the way. Just lead them in a circle until they're lined up and fire away. She's conceptually cool and inherently satisfying, but overstays her welcome slightly in my opinion. However, the ending is a very redeeming segment, and one I actually died to. Near the end, Mother Eliza will begin building up a mega barf that she unleashes after about 10 seconds. During this period, 2 biomass walls will break down, revealing switchgear triggers. If you don't manage to do both, more likely than not, you will die from a mixture of poison and orphans, but if you manage, a structure will form above the poison, keeping you relatively safe and allowing the fight to end. A central heart will then reveal, whereby you'll have to fend off an endless stream of orphans until Eliza keels over. This was the fight that solidified my love for the Javelin, after hating on its bitch-ass predecessor the whole game. This gun absolutely rules, and I'm an advocate for this along with the sword and hammer. Of course the arbalest as well, but I actually decided against using it with the bosses for the sake of both fairness and experience. Mother Eliza is a surprisingly dynamic boss, and though she's the rear of this list, is nowhere near among even the mediocre fights in the genre. As in, she's great. Number 4. The Unmerged One. Cronos' first boss appears out of thin air, or maybe more like silly string, making a striking appearance after a few hours of just base orphans and Bobby Bacala orphans. I can't help but make comparisons between survival horror games, and I feel like these dudes move just like the Whoppers from RE6, which is a funny ass name to call a fat person. But the comparison I mean to make is the Unmerged One and Ouroboros from RE5. Not in a discrediting way, but the similarity is uncanny. Giant black humanoid blob with orange polyps you shoot to put down. I guess one key difference in this case is that the Unmerged One seemingly has not just sentience but will, while Ouroboros is one mindless parasite in the giant boss slopfest that is RE5. I love that game, by the way. That wasn't a diss. It's just the only survival horror game with multiple fights I still completely forget exist. Like Popo Karimu. If I ever hear somebody whip that out in public, I'm going Manchurian Candidate. That shit is way too esoteric. Either way, Unmerged 1 is a rather simple fight with a particularly fantastic arena design that accentuates his mechanics. In general, it's shown early on that orphans are weak to fire, and here, fire is the key to victory, with explosive barrels and gas tanks around the arena causing the Unmerged 1 to tweak out and reveal his sacks. I think setting-wise this fight is exceptionally good. I particularly love the arena's shape, and the build-up was also a highlight, again, him being the first consciously aware presence you run into during your journey. I will take a moment to say in general that Bloober has a phenomenal track record with arena design, so moving forward I'm not going to comment on it too much, but this worked great and had me riveted by the end, especially how you can manually open it up at the cost of the Unmerged 1 unlocking longer ranged attacks. It's also worth noting that just before the end of the game there is an Unmerged duo. However, because of increased firepower and a larger arena, the fight feels practically the same, so I went with just counting it under the same umbrella. As the fight progresses, the Unmerged 1 will begin teleporting around, trapping the Traveler in his skid trail and also revealing his polyps during certain attacks, allowing for a theoretical Clint Eastwood / Greedo type finish. I opted for the safer, fire-based option, but ultimately I left this fight both satisfied and excited for what the rest had in store. Number 3. The Terror at the Steelworks and Station B. Though it shows up twice, the Terror happens to be one of the cooler survival horror bosses I've fought. I'll mainly be discussing the Steelworks Terror here, as Station B's is identical in all besides the inclusion of poison, arena design, and novelty, but the Terror on its own was a surreal second boss. For one, the opening sequence was one of the few times a jump scare has truly gotten me in a horror game in some time. Not only that, the fight started off bombastically with the Terror barging into multiple explosive barrels. This could be seen as a slight, and I do think its AI is the least coordinated of any boss, but I would also argue that was maybe intentional, with the Terror clearly being a uniquely animalistic orphan. The Terror is more of a typical shoot it until it dies type boss, with explosives around the arena meant to both stop it from attacking and damage it. I think I'm more than anything a massive fan of interactive environments, to be honest. The Terror has a deep attack pool with a set list of moves it pulls out for short, mid, and long range, and it feels satisfying baiting it into attacks and either running past or away from them. I also am a huge fan of its bodily design, with the head that takes increased damage actually being the human one on its elbow over the gaping hole. In all, both the Steelworks and Station B Terrors are extremely high intensity and test the limit of your resource management and game competency. I loved both and am glad they included two variants for differing experiences. Number 2, the Unmerged Terror. Much like our number 1 fight, the Unmerged Terror is both a sequence as well as a fight, which for me elevates bosses greatly in survival horror, where atmospheric feel can make or break an entire game. In this scenario, once you reach the back end of the hospital, it appears as if suddenly the anomaly has taken over, despite the Traveler currently living before the change. Gravity goes out the window and the world goes dark as she marches towards a door bubbling with biomass, where suddenly it jams shut, forcing the Traveler to face darkness. And cut. Just kidding. The Unmerged Terror appears and the fight begins, and though I've seen some online call this a glorified chase, which I suppose it can be, I feel that's a very plain description of what in reality is a well-made arena and boss that allows the fight to work both as an active chase and engaging melee duel. The main feature of the Unmerged Terror is that his weak points and ability to teleport are exactly like the Unmerged one. Combining two bosses is a rather simple idea, but it works out exceptionally here. I unfortunately entered this fight with the mace to test it out, and though results came back negative for it, it ended up working in my favor as I clip farmed the shit out of this fight. I Tapuria'd his ass back to wherever he came from and felt fucking sick doing it. I love survival horror for moments like this exactly. I ran out of every stop, from explosives to ammo, and had to rely on my dog shit melee to defeat a hulking behemoth. And yet, I came out on top. The Unmerged one isn't a revolutionary boss, but it's an interesting idea done perfectly. Number 1. The Pathfinder. Without any competition, the Pathfinder is by far Cronos the New Dawn's best boss. I honestly wasn't as excited by the ending as I'd hoped. I mean, to me it was kind of obvious that the Warden had some ulterior motive going on, but as a caveat, I did find it interesting that he didn't fall into the cliché camp, but rather had a somewhat sensible rationale when you consider he comes from a world devoid of love or attachment. Inversely, what in the fuck is Veronica thinking? How can you be whipped over a dude whose face you've never seen, who traps you in some weird portal universe like Lex Luthor did in Superman, and who has experimented on presumably thousands of his own kind, turning you into RoboCop just so he can keep your soul alive and try to crack? I don't really get it, but love is love, I guess. Either way, thank you, because it makes for one of the better survival horror bosses I've had the pleasure of fighting. The Pathfinder takes place over 4 main segments, all of which are generally similar, open spaces full of crates with ammo, pyres, and patches, but in which the Pathfinder devolves throughout, as in falls more and more corrupted, teleporting around, utilizing powers of a forgotten age, becoming, in essence, the very thing he stands against, the arbiter of the collective with the power to yield change over fate itself for an unknown good. I always find fights between Mentor and Padawan so fascinating, and this was no exception. Unlike the rest of the fights, who did honestly lack narrative weight, the Pathfinder is almost motivating. Despite its longevity, you want to see blood leak from his suit. As you just recently found out, the character you've seen grow and begin to appreciate the intricacies, both good and bad, of the human experience happen to ultimately be just another cog in his machine. His obsessive desire to, quote, save humanity. Yeah, right. I can see what's going on, little bro. I mean, he actually openly admits that his goal is to ultimately save Veronica, and whether or not it's because she has the knowledge to save humanity is for another time, but it does make the context of this whole thing a bit more interesting. Perhaps the Warden's human interest, as seen earlier in the game, wasn't out of appreciation, but rather an attempt to understand his alien emotions. Nonetheless, the fight makes great use of every mechanic in the game, with my standout segment being the Gravity Boots AoE during Phase 3. Phase 4 felt to me as if it should have been earlier. I know it's the same space as Phase 1, but I suppose environment doesn't matter as much with him zipping around throughout. I love the melee aspect to this as well. He feels very fair besides the one charge attack, which I only found consistently dodgeable with pyres or precise movement, but even that wasn't unfair, just abnormally hard to avoid. It was extremely rewarding getting headshots here, and though he has quite a lot of health, the fight is overtly generous with ammo drops, so much so I had a full inventory practically the entire time. I loved the Pathfinder and thought the ambiguous endings were a great way to end this story. Whether you let the cycle continue or break it by letting time flow and killing the Pathfinder, ultimately it appears as if humanity's demise is an inevitable consequence of greed and chasing power. Cronos: The New Dawn is a fantastic narrative with great bosses to match, and I'm so glad it lived up to my expectations. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Cronos was an incredible experience, and I really hope this is just the first of many in what should be a series of games in my opinion. What did you think of its bosses, and how would you rank them? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and with that said, deuces.